Welcome back. It is another episode of What's the Scoop, episode number 32 to be specific. Welcome back and welcome into this episode as we are sitting in the middle right now of the 2024 Major League Baseball first year player draft. Sitting here right now on the final day of the first half of the MLB season this year. And we're about halfway through the first round right now, a little more than halfway through the first round right now. But been a lot of exciting moves so far tonight. A lot of curious, some picks that some guys went a little bit earlier than we expected. We had a couple of guys who are still on the board that some people are a little bit surprised about. But it's been hopefully an exciting day for the future of some MLB franchises so far. We had major names from everyone from Yac Caglione going to the Royals at 6th overall. He was the two-way player that people were touting. We had Cincy, the switch pitcher, go at number 15 to the Seattle Mariners. The most recent pick just now, the Baltimore Orioles select North Carolina center fielder Vance Honeycutt. So there's a lot going on right now with regard to all of this, and it's going to be exciting to kind of follow these next couple of hours and next couple of days as the rounds continue. And then, of course, we've got the All-Star break kicking off tomorrow, which is going to include, obviously, the Home Run Derby and the All-Star game soon. So a lot of different off-the-field situations going on in the next 24, 48, 72 hours. And we'll cover all of that tonight. And as usual, if anybody has a different topic or a question or something they want to discuss, just drop it in the chat right there. Hopefully that's live, and we will have an opportunity to have some exciting discussions on whatever's on y'all mind tonight. So with that, let's jump into it. Starting off, just like I said, we've got obviously the baseball draft is live right now. We just got the Dodgers are now on the clock at 23rd overall. So they're going to be making their selection relatively soon. This is available on both ESPN and the MLB Network. But yeah, it's an interesting situation with baseball with regard or compared to other leagues and such. Just with the fact that you've got, just the fact that you've got don't have the ability to make trades, for example. So a lot of these, the main intrigue with regard to different positioning and such with professional, with the draft, a lot of it changes based on, the bonus pools of how much money each pick is allotted and how much each player will get, and the fact that some guys or some teams will take certain players earlier, just based on the fact that they can kind of manipulate how much money they spend in each selection, so that they can perhaps afford more value down the line if there's a player that they like who falls into the third or fourth round, who is likely to command more money. They're able to pick that up. So that's something that we'll be keeping an eye on as well. And excuse me. But yeah, so far, I think a couple of things that people are really noticing is that a couple of the first 8 picks really they were all college players. No high school players went until Pittsburgh took Connor Griffin at number 9. But and then after that, you kind of had another run on mostly college players. There was one high school player taken between 10 and 15. But yeah, it was kind of an interesting split with regard to a lot of college guys going, and then once you kind of hit those double-digit selections, then you started seeing more of those high school guys going off the board. There's been not really and this is not super surprising, but there's not really been a ton of pitchers going off the board just yet, excluding Caglianone and Cincy, which are the two-way player and the switch pitcher. Other than that, we're seeing only, if I'm counting this correctly, only 3 of the first 22 other picks were all of this, were pure pitchers. We got a comment coming in from Mr. Osborne saying, "What's up, Scoops? Looks like you're doing well. Pretty good race today in your neck of the woods at Pocono." Yeah, no, that I wasn't able to follow that today, but I'm glad to hear that because that's excuse me, because yeah, no, definitely that's a place that usually gets some good attention in that, not just in general, but also specifically with regard to the racing community. So glad to hear that was entertaining and that you enjoyed that. Also, for anybody who's following for the active pick by pick, the Dodgers just picked 23rd overall, and Kellen Lindsley, shortstop out of Hardy High School in Florida, is the selection here. So that's somebody whose name I am not quite as familiar with, to be honest. He's got 80 grade speed, and then his fielding, arm, and hit tools are looked at as kind of above or average to just slightly above average. Not got a lot of power, according to Kylie McDaniel, who's affiliated with ESPN. But anytime you see 80 speed, and I talked a little bit before on previous episodes about the Billy Hamilton, D. Gordon, maybe you can throw him in there. But those types of speedsters, even if it's for late in game speed and defense substitutions, you're always going to find some sort of value and some sort of place on a roster for those. But yeah, and then the next couple picks here, we've got the Atlanta Braves, San Diego Padres, and New York Yankees coming up in the next three selections. Now, obviously, for those who caught the episode last week, talked a little bit about how Major League draft kind of runs a little bit differently, in that a lot of these players you're not necessarily drafting for current need, because a lot of these guys won't necessarily see the professionals until maybe a year or two from now, or even a little bit later down the road. But these next three teams all do have, a couple things in common. One of those being that they were all teams with high expectations coming into the season, who to one degree of another have either stumbled throughout the entire season or kind of in choppy waters throughout the season, having some very high highs and some very low lows. So I am curious to see what these next three teams are going to do, even if they're likely not going to be positions or selections that affect the team and improve the team necessarily for 2024. I will be keeping an eye on this closely, especially Atlanta. This is a team that's got a bottom 10 ranked farm system right now, after just being a year or two removed, or a couple years removed from being arguably the top or one of the top in the game. But of course, once you develop the kind of core that they have, and of course you go on and win your title, and then you trade some of those guys in deals like for Matt Olson and company, obviously that's going to take a significant hit to your system. So that's kind of the catch-22 on that. But pretty sure the Braves and Alex Anthopoulos and company are not trading that ring for anything anytime soon. And that pick is in, so we'll get that to you once we have it. But going forward off of that, I just want to make sure that the Facebook and everything is active. Okay, sorry, just wanted to make sure that everything's good with regard to the channels. But it appears that it looks like it should. Yeah, and a couple of guys that are still on the board. The one guy that I'll bring up in particular is Cam Caminiti, and this is somebody who was looked at as potentially a very high selection in this year's draft. It's a left-handed pitcher, and he's out of high school in Arizona. He's committed to LSU, so that's probably impacting his selection stock. But his scouting report talks about how his type of prospect usually comes off the board around pick 15, but in this draft, he's quoted as saying it would likely be sooner than that. And we're sitting here at 24, and his name has not been called yet. So it's a little bit surprising to me. Again, I'm willing to bet that something with regard to the LSU situation there probably has something to do with that. That's typically the main reason why you see some of these guys. Like, I'm looking at other guys who are ranked according to this Fangraphs chart. Guys like William Schmidt, who I heard at the very late last second pulled his name out of the draft as somebody who was got a commitment going with LSU. Malcolm Moore with Stanford as a catcher, and Cash Mayfield would be another one as a pitcher with Oklahoma State. So there are still a few highly regarded, top 20, top 25 guys. Brody Brody Brett is one guy I'm looking at out of Iowa. Ryan Waldschmidt, outfielder out of Kentucky, and someone like Walter Yannick, who's a catcher out of Sam Houston. So there are still some guys who are considered in that top 25-ish range who do not come with that connection to a commitment to a college right now. But that is likely the main thing that's affecting some of these guys who we had expected perhaps to go a little bit higher. Mr. Osborne says, I forget who the Rockies got, but I heard he's a heavy hitter. Yeah, so the Rockies, so the guy that a lot of us thought speaking of Cam Caminiti, that is who just got selected by the Atlanta Braves here at 24. So the guy I just spent the last 2 or 3 minutes talking about is now off the board. He goes left-handed pitcher Cam Caminiti goes to the Atlanta Braves out of high school in Arizona at 24th overall. But yeah, going back to what you were asking about the Colorado Rockies. So the Rockies, a lot of people had them, including myself, had heard a lot of connection between them and Chase Burns, pitcher out of Wake Forest, who I talked highly about their program recently, and they had 2 guys go in the top 4. Just another example of how impressive they've been. But but yeah, so Chase Burns went 1 spot ahead of the Colorado Rockies. He went to the Cincinnati Reds at number 2. And the guy who ultimately did end up, as a result, going to the Rockies at number 3, who a lot of people actually had ranked higher overall, is third baseman Charlie Condon. He is out of Georgia. He was a Georgia Bulldog. He was actually announced as a third baseman / outfielder, which I talked with somebody about this. He got a lot of comps right off the rip to somebody like Chris Bryant, which I think is somewhat misguided. I mean, you hear third baseman, Rockies, bat, and third baseman, outfielder, Rockies, and big bat, and I can understand, I guess, some of the reason to and the motivation to put that comp on him, but no, I don't think that that's necessarily the type of player that you're actually going to see here. Looking at his scouting reports, if I can pull that up real quick, he's not got the greatest hit tool in the world, but that big game power, his fielding ability could potentially, I think, end up being, about league average, I would say, depending on what position he ends up at. I think his speed is going to become more of a game impact and perhaps already could be, than Chris Bryant. I think that Condon maybe won't get the same level of contact maybe that Bryant did in his best days. But I mean, I think Rockies fans can salivate over what he could potentially do in Coors Field. This is, he's being looked at as, you talk about in-game power. So not just how far he can hit the ball, but in terms of the expected, what you'll actually get out of that bat in terms of home run output and extra bases and such. Condon is ranked right up there with the likes of Kyle None, which I spoke about, and someone like PJ Morlando, who went not too long ago as well. And there's a lot of people who believe that he may actually have a higher upside than someone like Morlando with regard to that. Whether or not he reaches that, obviously, is still left to be determined. Sorry about that. We had a bit of a spam intruder in the chat just then, but hopefully that's taken care of now. But so we got the San Diego Padres up now. Top couple players available, guys. We've got guys like Kentucky outfielder Ryan Waldschmidt, catcher from Stanford Moore, which I spoke about, and then a couple of guys I already talked about as pitchers, Mayfield and Brett. Those are some of the guys that are that ESPN has as some of the next best available. The New York Yankees, which is obviously the team that I follow the most, are picking after San Diego. I would have liked them to grab somebody. The guy that I was really hoping for was Chinchi, that switch pitcher who ultimately was selected by the Seattle Mariners at 15th overall. There was a lot of speculation and a lot of reporting in the last couple of days that New York was heavy on him, but did not go that route. He did not fall. Not only did he not fall that far, he didn't really fall anywhere near that far. He went off the board 11 picks before that. So kind of, again, still is really anybody's guess. There hasn't really been any sort of speculation that I've heard so far with how the board has shaken down. There's not really anything that I've heard after he went off the board in terms of, people are expecting this to go this route, or think that this guy could be in play here. Um, excuse me. There's some speculation going on that they think that it's going to be a college arm for the Yankees. And one guy that was brought up as a potential selection here would be Yannick. As I see just now, left-handed pitcher Cash Mayfield going here to the Padres at 25, which means the Yankees are now on the clock. Again, the report I just mentioned a few seconds ago has Yannick potentially being the guy connected to the Yankees here at 26. Although says be on the lookout for, in general, be on the lookout for potentially a college pitcher to go here, which I would love. I would prefer to see somebody who's actually going to start right in the system and not go to college and re-enter the draft 3 years from now. If this whole if the report about college pitcher being true, or rather is true, then I would absolutely love to see it be a guy like a Brody Brett here, somebody who was expected to go a lot higher. If I'm looking at somebody as a college arm at this selection, Brody Brett is, from what I'm able to look at here, definitely looks like the guy that I would probably be targeting to address that, if that's the route that the Yankees do ultimately go. Because after that, I'm not really seeing a highly regarded guy. The only other guy I could come up with perhaps would be a Chris Cortez, who I know has gotten some conversation about perhaps being the first guy to reach the majors. So he might be the other guy I'm looking at. So if they do go that pitching route for college, I'm looking at either Brett or Cortez as that selection. Keith says, Scoop, tell me more about Christian Moore, second baseman selected by my Angels, please. First of all, glad to see you on here. So I was a little bit surprised by that selection, but excuse me, sorry. He should be all right at second base. Although for a position like that, I would like to see some of his range and his development on that side of the ball improve. Again, you know how I've spoken about second baseman in the past. His big tool right now is definitely his raw power, and he's, I mentioned earlier, he's somebody who there's a lot of belief that he'll be able to get to most of that at least. But a combination of his hit tool not being great, especially his, he has room to improve with controlling the bat through the zone. And again, a guy who's got a future at second base, in my opinion, needs to have better regard on fielding. Otherwise, I could see this being a guy who ultimately becomes, maybe a first baseman or maybe a corner outfield type, depending on how they choose to use him. But it's hard for me to see somebody like him sticking at second base unless his glove improves and his range improves as well. So yeah, that's how I would characterize it. Definitely an offense for position for me, but he's got to improve his bat control to be able to get to that high end power that he's got. No picks yet in on New York. Just to kind of update on that. Still looking to see. No real clarity right now as to which route it sounds like it's going. With regard to whether that's it's going to be that college pitcher or someone like Yannick that we heard before. So just waiting on that information to come in as we continue to see, for those who are watching the Kiley McDaniel's top available players, kind of scroll through here a little bit. But I don't know. It's very interesting because I always feel like every time I look up, I feel like I'm constantly seeing that a team is on the clock, but they're not really showing what that clock is. So it's hard for me to kind of be able to know if a team is expected to make a selection at any second or not, because it's this kind of ticker that they've got, or this chyron that they've got, doesn't really match up with what I'm used to in other drafts. And right now you just see, for those who aren't watching, they just cut to commercial breaks. So we will see how that unfolds, but pardon. Yeah, there's no nothing really coming out right now. But I'll kind of pivot it off of that for a second while we wait to hear some of these other selections and some of these other moves that are going on. Just kind of taking stock of of where we're at across the league as the first half comes to an end. So, end of the first half, the if you want to call it the sort of league favorites on either side between the AL and the NL. Kind of looking at some of how the season has played out so far. I think the AL, you're looking at the Orioles looked at as a team that's favored. The Twins definitely, the Astros have definitely kind of continued to right the ship from the disastrous start to the season that they had. New York has still, they really helped themselves starting the season as hot as they did. As they go into this last month of just being, disaster shows, with the exception of this kind of last couple of days here. But, I think a lot of people are looking at it right now as kind of that top four right now. Maybe you can throw the Guardians in there, but kind of that top 4 or 5 right now being Baltimore, Minnesota, Houston, Cleveland, and New York, in not necessarily in that order. The Yankees are selecting right now, and it is Ben Hess, right-handed. Alabama. All right, roll tide. We got an Alabama pitcher coming to us. That is nice to see. Love seeing my Tide represented in any sport. So getting a Tide guy over here is nice to see. 6'5", 255. So we basically got the pitching version of Aaron Judge. 21 years old. I'm still getting used to the fact that I'm seeing these guys getting drafted younger than me now. And is a right-handed pitcher. Excuse me. So just pulling up his scouting report real quick. Says 3-year starter at Bama, was limited to just 30 career starts due to injuries. As usual, the Yankees love their injury-prone guys. Walks were under control as a sophomore, but not in his other 2 seasons. Lacks feel for breaking ball release and scatters location, especially as far as the slider is concerned. Hess is a durable-looking starter prospect who might throw more strikes with improved conditioning. This is according to Fangraphs. So, just looking at that real quick, because admittedly, this is not one of the players I'm most familiar with, although he had top 5 in school history in strikeouts last year with 106. This is somebody I'm not quite as familiar with, but he's described as having a monster curveball that generated a miss rate of over half. And that's something that I know that the Yankees obviously are very big on. He's gotten high marks for his extension and for his arm, kind of his tunneling of his arm usage and all of that. So some positive things that I'm seeing from the initial information that I'm able to peruse here. And I think what I like to see here is that, and yes, I love the high ceiling guys, and I love swinging for the fences and all of that. But honestly, sometimes there's times where you just got to go for what you are pretty confident is going to be useful to your team and what you're pretty confident is going to be successful with this guy, and not do the Esteban Florial thing where you've got the loud tools, but nothing ever comes of it because the sort of the basic stuff never gets solidified. This is a guy who's got an average fastball, but his breaking stuff is great. He's got average command. That fastball doesn't get quite to 100, but it tops off around 98. He's got good athleticism. He's got a solid delivery. A little bit of a long delivery. So I imagine that they're going to try and clean that up a little bit. But 2 words, should stick, or the 2 phrases should stick as a starter and durability. Those should be music to a lot of Yankees fans' ears with regard to some of what we've seen recently. We've tried to take some of the big swings at times with arms, no pun intended. We've tried to take some of the big swings at times with arms, and it just has not gone in our favor. I mean, how many times have we seen these guys get, ranked top 20, top 30 in baseball, or get these, Pedro Martinez type comps, and then they're, let go to another team for cash considerations 5 years later. So I'm happy with this pick. Again, definitely not, somebody who I think is going to get a lot of, jaw dropping going on with this selection, but I don't think the Yankees needed that. I think the Yankees just needed to say, you know what, let's just get some good arms in this system. and we'll work on getting we trust our player development to kind of train them up and hopefully unlock a little bit more out of them as their time goes on. That being said, the Philadelphia Phillies are now on the clock, 27th overall, and that will be followed up by the Houston Astros at 28 and the Arizona D-backs at 29. Coming back to the, coming back, and this is an interesting comment here just then. There was a dialogue going on with with Fangraphs, Eric Longenhagen. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But there was a comment that says, Hess to the Yankees, is this another one of their weird picks? And Longenhagen says, they turned so many weirdos into good players, which I find that kind of amusing. Although it is true. I mean, if there's one thing you can say positively about Brian Cashman and this regime, it's that they will go after these pitchers that nobody's heard of and turn them into all-star talent, typically in the bullpen. So hopefully they can also do it with this guy as a starter. That's where it sounds like they expect him to stay. But, we'll see. Philly has selected at 27, Dante Nori, center fielder out of Northville High School, Michigan. Who is that? I do not know who this player is. What they've got coming in is somebody who I think can be described, as we discussed earlier, as as somebody who looks like he's being drafted now, probably a little bit, manipulating the slot a little bit to allow Philadelphia to pick up some other guys later on that they like. So that would be my guess here. But and he's also listed as committed to Mississippi State. That's going to be an interesting one to follow for Philadelphia over the next couple of days. But that's where we're sitting right now with that selection having just come in. Going back to what I was talking about with regard to kind of recapping where we're at in the league, I said for the last couple of weeks and going back to about a month ago that I didn't see this future deadline in what is now, I think, about 2.5 weeks. Wow, that's coming up fast. That this trade deadline is going to be relatively active. I do not think it is. I didn't think it was going to be then, and I still don't think it is. Mainly because you don't really have a large split of teams that really don't think that they are contenders right now or for this season. And I think you're going to have a lot of teams either just waiting it out and banking on either getting injured guys back or struggling guys getting right or one thing or another. But I mean, someone like the team like the Red Sox was at one point thought of as somebody who could be sellers, and now a lot of people are. I've probably heard about the Red Sox more than anybody else that people think that not only could they sell, but they think it would be a bad idea for them. I'm sorry, rather, could they buy? But they think it'd be a bad idea for them not to buy, just based on the fact that the ownership and front office has not been in the fans' good graces over the past couple of years. First with that Mookie Betts trade in 2020 with the Dodgers that ended up becoming a monumental disaster for the team. And then with regard to how some other players and negotiations and such were handled in the next couple of years. And then obviously all culminating with the bringing in of Craig Breslow after the ouster of Chaim Bloom. So I think there's a lot of people who are waiting to see what they do and hoping that they make some aggressive moves to acquire players. So that what originally was a possibility has now changed. The Mets, I think anybody who thought that it was possible that Pete Alonso could get moved, I think that is very much off the table at this point, as they sit now 3 games over 500 with about a coin flip chance to make the playoffs. But there's a lot of teams that have at least that sort of coin flip chance to make the playoffs. And, with the exception of maybe, I've talked about for a while, I've talked about those 6 teams, the Nationals, Angels, Marlins, White Sox, Athletics, and Rockies. The only other team I might be able to add to that would be maybe the Toronto Blue Jays, but I haven't even heard that they're that motivated to sell either. And then you bring down guys like, or you go to teams like the Nationals. I think the Nationals are building. I don't think that they're buying, but I don't think I'm almost certain that they're not buying, but I don't think they're selling either necessarily. I think they're kind of just more building. The Angels definitely think Luis Rengifo is a guy that I could see getting moved. He's been connected quite a bit to teams like the Yankees and to other teams that could use middle infield help, which is one of the few things that is in pretty consistent demand. So I could see Rengifo going. I could see maybe one of their bullpen arms going if they want to do that. But I don't anticipate that they're going to make any sort of massive sell-offs either. The Athletics, who knows? I've talked about the Rockies quite a bit over on Settle the Scores. And then the Chicago White Sox, I mean, what else can you say about the fact that this is one of the teams that's going to go down in history as one of the worst teams ever? And, a couple of the guys that people thought, could be, that they could look to move and, sell off as part of a sale. Luis Robert, his OBP is under 300. His batting average is 222. He's striking out a third of the time. So his value is definitely not going to be what it could have been. And he also missed half the season. Paul DeJong is not really showing much of anything aside from defense. But again, for where he's at and what potentially he'd be going up against, you're not going to get much of anything for him at all. Corey Lee, who was once a pretty highly regarded prospect, is having a horrible offensive season. His OPS is barely 600, which shouldn't even have you in the major leagues, but that just shows you where the White Sox are. Yoan Moncada, who was once the number one prospect in all of baseball, is perhaps the most productive player on here, but he's played all of 11 games for this team. Tommy Pham, whose calling card has long been his defense, is having a horrible defensive season. And he's also 36 years old, so I would exercise significant caution if you're looking at any sort of significant role for him, particularly on defense in a place like center field at the age of 36, also depending on where he would go. And then you look over to the pitching side, and, I mean, so a lot of us have heard, the Garrett Crochet as probably the big prize there. Him, coming off of him, I don't see anything that's that appetizing on the pitching side either. So, you look at the Eric Fetty. It was having a decent season. Would probably be their ace if not for Crochet. But Chris Flexen, who used to pitch for the Mariners, his fielding independent ERA is just under 5. The other guys who have gotten starts for them, Andrew Thorpe and Jonathan Cannon, their peripherals are just not impressive at all. Thorpe is walking almost as many guys as he's striking out. This being the former New York prospect, by the way. He's listed here as Andrew Thorpe, but that's Drew Thorpe. His peripherals are not impressive. Again, I just mentioned his walk to strikeout situation, and you just kind of take it from there. And of course, when you have a situation like that, obviously you're not really brimming at the top with regard to talent in your bullpen as well. Jody said Astros are on the clock. Yep, I just saw them take Yatsik, which was the catcher that I had mentioned a couple of minutes ago. I think it was called Sam Houston is where he was out of. So they get a bit of a hometown guy there, just for Jody, who was pointing out the Astros being on the clock a couple moments ago. How many of the top 10 picks do you think we see in MLB next year? So let me. I'm just going to pull up the list real quick just to make sure I've got the right names in front of me here. I think you're going to see just based on what I can see here. I'm going to guess you're probably looking at maybe. I don't think there's a great chance that you see more than maybe maybe 2. I think that there's still a lot of development for a couple of guys. First of all, Connor Griffin's already an LSU commit, so we'll have to see how that pans out. But I think I think that there's a chance for a couple of the higher end guys like Bazana was somebody who people thought could be a bit of a fast track. I think a couple of the position players are more likely there. Pardon me. And I do think that a couple of these guys who went high end, I think they're going to definitely crack that top 100 prospect list pretty quickly. But I wouldn't expect many of these guys. I think that you're mostly going to look at 2026 before you see most of these guys, even in the top 10. making much of an impact at that level. But again, like I mentioned, there a lot of them, with the exception of Griffin, are college guys. They're not high school players, so that could perhaps boost that up a little bit more than it's been in years past. Teams like, excuse me, Chicago have really revamped their pitching development, if you want to call that, recently. So that'll be an interesting test for them. Yacht Caglianone, excuse me, I keep butchering that. Him being a two-way player, wouldn't be surprising if they took a little bit of extra time with him as well. Yeah, like I'm looking at somebody like maybe I could see Condon, actually, the Rockies guy. I could see him being somebody who jumps up there. I could see maybe Kurtz for Oakland being somebody who jumps up there. And I mentioned Bazana as well. So I think maybe those couple of those first four or five-ish picks, I could perhaps see being candidates for that. But after you get past that, you get to Caglianone, you get to Connor Griffin. I already mentioned going to LSU, but guys like Weatherholt, he fell a little bit. A lot of people thought that he could potentially go number one overall. So be curious to see how that impacts him. And then I couldn't really see Christian Moore jumping up that quickly. Perhaps his timeline would be influenced by a Rengifo trade, but I'd be shocked if that were tied too quickly, or tied too closely, rather. Jody says Tyler Anderson will be moved. I still don't know how he got an all-star selection. I'm sorry. He was by far the most confusing guy for me to get an all-star selection, even though Clay Holmes also got one, and he crapped the bed quite a bit recently. Those two guys definitely would have rather seen other guys on the all-star team, as of right now at least, than those two. Mr. Ronquillo says, evening scoop. Good evening to you, Mr. Ronquillo. Hope you had a good week. Also, I want to just shout out Mr. Ronquillo real quick, because on the K&K metrics for the Facebook page and whatnot, I feel like every week I'm seeing Mr. Ronquillo as a top viewer, watcher, commenter of content for the channel, and a lot of times it's got with a pretty good stronghold. So just want to shout out to him for being such an avid be avidly involved with so many different shows, and really appreciate that. And obviously, as I've said prior, good luck to your Broncos with Bo Nix this season. And I've missed the last couple of selections here. We are now with the 30th overall pick. We've got the Texas Rangers on the clock. I'll catch up on those selections right now, just to kind of see where we're at chronologically, and just make sure that we cover everything. The last couple of selections. So I mentioned Yannick, mentioned Nori. Okay, I only missed one, but it was Slade Caldwell, outfielder from Arkansas's Valley View High School. Not sure. I have to double check and see if he's one of the guys who's got a college commit. But that was that most recent selection. He's got a commitment with Ole Miss. What's with all the Mississippi guys here? Holy smokes! And I just saw another Mississippi guy. One of the best available is center fielder Dakota Jordan from Mississippi State. This is a very Mississippi draft, which is interesting since I fly there in 4 days. So that's where we're at right now. And then I'll go back to what I was talking about with regard to the standings and the playoffs and such. Just in terms of where we're at right now, if I were to give sort of a most surprising team in the American League to wrap out the whole first half, I would definitely say Cleveland. I know I mentioned them a couple times, but it bears repeating, I think, because the Twins have been great, but they didn't really surprise me. I kind of expected that. I expected the Royals to take a little bit of a jump, which they have. Astros and Mariners don't really surprise me all that much. Yankees and Orioles and Red Sox, that was kind of the top three that we all expected. My biggest disappointment in the American League would probably be, I've said Toronto a couple of times. They've been massively disappointing to me, just because, again, I think that this is a team who has consistently underperformed the level of talent that it has, both hitting and pitching. They're currently projected to be about a 76-win team, which I'm just, with some of the arms they have, and guys like Bichette and Vladito and Jansen, and just the guys they keep bringing through there, just it's not a team that feels like it should be winning mid-70s games at this stage. So they're definitely a disappointment for me. I think the other disappointment for me, even though they've not been terrible, I think it's got to be the Texas Rangers. I think you go from winning the World Series and looking pretty convincingly in doing so, just in the past year or so, and then all of a sudden you're sitting at the break, you're 4 games under 500, and you're looking at about a 12% chance right now to make the playoffs and projected to be about an 80-win team according to Fangraphs projections. So that's probably how I would evaluate where things are at in the American League. To shift over into the NL, because I know I've talked about the AL mostly. Biggest surprise for me, I know, again, I've said it before, so I won't belabor it too much, but Mr. Heron, if you're here, it's your Milwaukee Brewers. Again, nothing I really haven't said before where, they lost Counsell, they lost, what's his name? The executive, Stearns, they lost, or they gave away basically Corbin Burns to the American League, to the Baltimore Orioles, and they're sitting there now with the 4th best odds to make the playoffs in the NL and the best odds in their own division, and it's not even really that close. So definitely my biggest surprise there, and really impressive, especially. And something else that I also, I feel like every couple of weeks I uncover something about Milwaukee that I've neglected to mention before, but I think that this is another one I haven't mentioned yet, is just the fact that they also, when they got left holding the bag with regard to Counsell, and they thought it was pretty good chance that they would lose Counsell, but they didn't think that they would necessarily lose him in the division. But also, they had a very difficult situation with regard to replacing him, and they ended up hiring Pat Murphy, promoting Pat Murphy from within, who was not somebody who was universally or pretty remotely widely thought as a favorite or somebody that they were really looking toward to fit there. Kind of felt like that was almost a bit of a fallback option for them. So the fact that it's worked out so well for them is just, good for the fans of Milwaukee there. That's really my main surprise. Everything else has been pretty chalk for me in the National League. If I were to go for a disappointment, could say the Cubs, but again, the Cubs have just kind of been there. They kind of have just not really been much of anything the last couple of years, with any sort of identity, I guess. In 2016, we all thought that they were going to be around for the next 15 years, and it just feels like every year, for one reason or another, the Cubs just can't get out of their own way, or they're injured, or guys regress, or whatever. Just that core that we thought that they were going to have with guys like Schwarber and Amora and Rizzo for when he was there, Baez, and I'm forgetting at least one player just on the hitting side alone. I already said Bryant. I don't know. It'll come to me at some point, I'm sure. But just the way that they really fell off is shocking to me. I would probably say I'm slightly disappointed by. I guess you could kind of make a case for any of the 3 teams in the NL West that are kind of in that sort of gummed up 500 level. The Diamondbacks, of course, they had just been in the World Series, and they're at 500 now, and they're less than 50% to make the playoffs, projected to win around 83 games. The Padres, who I think a lot of people are looking at year in and year out, and just saying, when is this team going to get to be what we've heard that they're supposed to be under AJ Preller? And it feels like they just keep making what we believe are the right moves, but not being able to put it together, almost kind of similarly to what I talked about with Toronto in the American League. And then the Giants. Man, the Giants confuse me because I really liked a couple of the moves that they made this offseason. Obviously, they were the team that kind of for a while kept trying to get their starter or their star and kept trying to get their big piece and were continuously unable to do so. They've got Chapman now. They've still got Conforto. They've got Jorge Soler. Estrada had turned into a solid piece for them. He's kind of fallen off offensively, but on defense, he's still what he's always been. But they also have had difficulty with some of their top young guys not turning out. Joey Bart didn't pan out the way that they thought he would. Helio Ramos has not panned out the way that they thought he would. Recently he's been pretty hot offensively, but on the defensive side, he's not been much of a contributor. He does actually lead the team in home runs right now, but again, I think that they're not quite getting from him exactly what they expected. And then, some of the other guys who have kind of they've been players. They've not necessarily been major contributors. They've kind of been sort of like that average tier, maybe a little bit below. But on the pitching side, and this is just one area where you really don't expect the Giants, especially with where they play, to really struggle. And they really have this season in that rotation outside of Webb. Jordan Hicks, Jordan Hicks has been decent, but not in any way great. Kyle Harrison, similarly. Caton Wynn, who's 26 years old, his ERA is. I don't think he's bad. I don't think he's as bad this year as his ERA says he is. I think he's gotten a little bit inflated with regard to some of the contact he's given up with some of these home runs that killed him a little bit. They had Eric Miller, who they kind of have kicked around between the rotation and the bullpen. But he's decent, but he's not somebody who is really, changing games for them. And they've used, this is another thing that I am just realizing now as I go back and kind of re-review these numbers. We're looking at 13 different players who have started a game for who have at least started one game for the San Francisco Giants as pitcher this year. And again, a lot of these guys are made spot starts as, having mostly been relievers, but it's just, that's not usually an area in which we see the Giants struggle all that much. So that's a little bit perplexing for me, but I think maybe just by default, I would lean toward Arizona as being my big disappointment there. But I'm really tempted to put either the Padres or the Giants as well. I think you can make the strong case for any one of them. And then just for fun, I'll throw out my current ALCS and NLCS predictions right now. Excuse me. Just because they're getting hot at the right time, and because I'm sure that they're going to go and make moves at the deadline, and I'm sure that they're going to get back a couple of their injured guys who are going to somehow return to form. Until I see an ALCS that doesn't have the Houston Astros in it after the type of play that they've had recently, I'm going to assume that they lock up one of the spots, as irritating as that is for me to say. And then elsewhere, I'm not comfortable saying the Orioles right now. I see them as a more flawed team than some of their play recently suggests. I think that they are, for example, they won 2 games this weekend, but the other team lost the game more than that team won. It was, New York continues to get themselves beaten in just ridiculous ways. For anyone who saw that series. And no, New York's not going to be my pick either for that other selection. But the team that I'm tempted to go with one of 2 teams here. I'm tempted to go with either the Guardians or the Twins. But because I've continued to talk up I know I've continued to talk up the Twins with regard to their pitching, with regard to where they're positioned in not just their rotation, but their bullpen. But also, as I look at in terms of what they have available to potentially make moves, I think that the Twins have a better farm to deal from than the Guardians. And I also see that the Twins have shown more willingness to be aggressive recently than have the Guardians. So I'm going to say the ALCS is the Twins versus the Astros. And I have a hard time picking against Houston because of how obviously their dynasty has gone the last 6 years, but I'll go with Houston, or I'll go with Minnesota to win that series. I think they'll probably take it to a 6 or a 7 game, but especially if the series ends in Minnesota, I think they'll be able to win it there. That is not a pitching staff and just kind of a complete roster that I think gets enough attention. Also, just coming in right now, that Ben Hess selection for the Yankees was under slot, as I discussed earlier. So that is, I talked a little bit about what that means and how that works. So that sounds like we can be looking at the Yankees to potentially make some grabs later on for guys who maybe fall a little bit more than people expect. So just gonna include that, which makes a lot of sense based on where he was selected and who they took in that spot. Because I think that people thought that for picking that selection, you probably could have gotten somebody quote unquote better, I guess. Although I know that's a very relative term. So I think that you're looking at, we'll see how in the next 2 or so days how they choose to use that apparent money that they've saved up, because it seems like this is part of a broader plan that I'm very curious about, because this is not a team that typically you see making that type of decision or going that route, but it does have me fascinated. It does have me intrigued. Jody says, who is the Yankees' daddy in the playoffs? As we know, it's Houston. You don't have to remind me that I went to that game where the Yankees were swept in 4 in 2022. And that team has, that image of that player who wore 54, whose name I will not speak of because I'm going to be treating him like Voldemort at this point, for that look that I've seen on his face more than once in the playoffs as he gives up a home run that kills us against Houston. I don't even remember where he's playing now, but good riddance. And then National League, with regard to an NLCS projection. I think just looking at the Phillies right now, it feels really hard for me to kind of pick against them just based on what they've accomplished. They'll probably end up still. Excuse me, sorry. They'll probably end up still winning the division unless the bottom really falls out, and I'm just really not seeing much evidence that that's going to happen. And I also still think that it's possible that they could do more in the next couple of weeks, at least to add more arms to that bullpen. Teams never have enough pitching, as we know. So I think that they're just a team, and they have a pretty challenging schedule the rest of the way. So if they're able to keep up this sort of 64% win percentage that they've had recently, or that they've had to start the season, I don't think that there's going to be a ton that's going to be able to get in their way. And this might be the season where we finally see them break through after they were for the longest time a team that hadn't been able to win in the postseason longer than pretty much anybody except for the Seattle Mariners. The other side of things, on paper, my gut would tell me to pick the LA Dodgers, but I've just seen too many times, whether it's Dave Roberts or whether it's the team thinking, team going off of pure talent rather than cohesion and all of that. I'm just something in my gut is telling me to stay away from the Dodgers. So I'm going to go with the team that I've consistently called the most well-run organization in baseball. I think that they, pardon me, they've gotten a huge year from guys like Ozuna. Albies has been, even though he's struggled a little bit, Albies has still been a decent player. Acuna was doing great until unfortunately he got hurt. But they brought in guys like Kalenic, which I think was a fantastic, kind of underrated move. Olsen has fallen off a little bit, but guys like Riley and I mentioned Kalenic and Albies, and then on the pitching side of things, I don't know if anybody has shocked the baseball world this year more than Chris Sale. You've got a rotation. I talked about the pitching for the Twins in the American League. Chris Sale, fielding independent ERA of about 2 and striking out 33% of the batters and giving up about 1 home run every 18 innings, which in this day and age is absurd. Ronaldo Lopez is somehow giving up fewer home runs than that. His fielding independent ERA is 3.06, and his ERA itself is under 2. Fantastic ground ball rate. Max Fried, 3.5 with regard to his fielding independent ERA, still less than a home run per 9 innings. Barely walking anybody, about 7.7%. You can make the case that their 4th best starter is Charlie Morton. A pretty strong case, actually. Their fourth best starter is Charlie Morton. This is a guy who's pitched almost 100 innings, barely allowing a home run every 9 innings, and is all of his, whether it's ERA, fielding independent ERA, whatever you want to use, are around 4, like around 4, where a lot of teams, their number 1 or number 2 starter has those numbers around or just over 4. This Braves rotation is kind of giving me, and I wasn't alive during then, but this Braves rotation is kind of giving me a little bit of a you know, Smoltz, Maddox, Glavine, that type of vibe from the the mid '90s, and then other guys that they've been able to slot in, whether it's been Schwellenbach, whether it's been a couple of games from whether it's been a couple of games from guys like Smith Schauber. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Just their pitching, I think, is formidable as well. So. I'll call that Phillies Braves. And again, we know that we always talk about how pitching wins championships. And just reading this, it's hard for me to pick against them. So I'll say the Braves beat the Phillies to go to the World Series. And I'll say, just because of their experience, I'll say the Astros beat the Twins to go to the World Series. So that sets up Astros versus Braves. I'll see, and I could very well change this depending on who they get back and how those players come back. But based on how they're playing as of right now and recently, I'm very reluctant to pick against Houston. But for now, I'm going to say I think in 7 games, Atlanta beats the Astros in 7. And I don't want to hear that was a bias because I picked them to go to the ALCS and didn't even pick the Yankees to get there. So I was very fair to your Astros, Jody. He says I had 2 scoops. Don't worry. I always look forward to that every week and every show. All right. I'm just going to double check and see if there was anything that broke in the draft these last couple of moments that I want to get to. Okay. It looks like the last selection came in at Texas Rangers Stanford catcher Malcolm Moore, a guy that I'm a little surprised fell as far as he did. So just kind of looking real quickly as I just do a brief perusal here. And again, this is just me doing a kind of a rough evaluation right now. And I'll have more on this after I've been able to digest it for, an upcoming episode. But sitting where I'm at with the draft picks that have been made, pardon me, I really like the Weatherholt get for the Cardinals. Again, somebody who a lot of people thought could go first, falls to number 7. I like the Yaka Leone pick. The trepidation I have there is I see some comps with guys like with the profile, at least for pitching side, of guys like Asa Lacy, and that development did not work out well at all. So my hope is that, especially with a guy who's got more risk now because he's on 2 sides of the ball, hope that that's not something that really becomes an issue for them. But if they're able to get the most out of him, then I really like that selection as well. Hagen Smith for the White Sox, I'm excited to see. Charlie Condon, I'm excited to see. Again, that power in Coors Field, if they're able to get him through that black hole of the PCL, those 2 teams that I always talk about on Settle the Scores, they're able to get him through that death valley, that black hole, that bottomless pit, whatever you want to call those AA and AAA teams for them. Those are probably my 3 favorite, my 3 favorite picks right now in some order would probably be Weatherholt, Condon, and Hagen Smith. Probably my most confusing or surprising pick right now. I would probably have to say. I'd probably have to say Dante Nori, just because again, he's the only name I hadn't even heard of coming into this draft. I do see some things that I can understand the affinity for, but again, very high risk player. He was very. He's not considered to have a super projectable build. He is going to turn 20 soon. Again, that speed. Is going to be able to play and give you a role somewhere in an organization, but I'm just not sure. I maybe they're hoping that this becomes like a Greg Allen type of player, or that guy his name's escaping me from a couple of years ago, who was just stealing bases like crazy but doing pretty much nothing else, or even like a Billy Hamilton type. If they're hoping that he's going to become something like that, and be maybe like what Ben Revere was for them a couple years ago. Maybe I could see that, but just a selection I was very surprised to see for sure. And that being said, we are at exactly 1 hour into the show. Man, just another episode that just flew by. Really appreciate everybody tuning in. It was a lot of fun covering the draft. A lot of interesting moves made, including my Yankees taking that Ben Hess selection at 26. So I'm very intrigued by how the rest of this draft is going to play out for many teams. And I know I'll be breaking down that Condon selection on a future episode of Settle the Scores. Which on that note, before I sign off here, just want to remind everybody, for those who missed it on Thursday, I will not be able to record and air Settle the Scores Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Mountain this week due to my travel to Mississippi, and I'm going to just have some conflicts that I'm not going to be able to do the show at that time. I am working on figuring out sort of a contingency plan, or working on figuring out what that's going to look like in the next week or so. And I will have updates circulating for that as they become more specific and become more, I don't want to use the word finalized necessarily, but become more firmed up. And that will be out as soon as possible. But in the meantime, thank you all so much for tuning in tonight. Enjoy the Home Run Derby in the next tomorrow, and the All-Star Game on Tuesday. And then, of course, before long, we're back into it for the second half of the 2024 baseball season. And then before we know it, the football fans out there, we're going to be talking about all that again as training camp and everything else starts to kick up. So sports calendar never sleeps. It's one of the reasons why we all love it. So that being said, again, updates forthcoming regarding Settle the Scores. And I will see y'all next week on the 21st, Sunday the 21st, for the next episode of What's the Scoop? Same scoop time, same scoop channel.